One-on-one. One trainer, one trainee, 13 weeks. We want to develop soul winners. Not just, and I appreciate those who were here last night and you got started. But would you like to have the confidence and build? This program builds up not just soul winners we're going to see. This is the trainee's guide. This is what every trainee gets. This is the director's guide. This is one time everything in here can be copied, can be reproduced. We don't try to make money off of it. Everything we need, I think I hit the wrong button, brother. I think that's my fault. I hit it on my clicker there. And so everything you need is in here. Down to attendance charts, down, everything you need is in this manual right here. Every student gets a trainee's guide, and those can be ordered. The training series, DVD training series is in here. There's packets in here to be able to copy off all the camera-ready forms that can be scanned into a computer and printed off. All the ordering that's needed, the incentives, and how to do that. Everything that's needed to run Operation Go is here. But here's the basis of the program. The basis of the program is one trainer, one trainee, soul winning director once a week, giving about an hour and a half to 2 hour session once a week, training all the not training, but teaching all the trainees. And then a trainer and a trainee is going out minimum 3 hours a week, every week, soul winning. That's why it's almost impossible to train more than one person at a time. 3 hours don't sound like a lot, but trying to fit 3 hours into a week. Now, you can divide that up. We're going to see that. You may do an hour and a half one day and an hour and a half the next. But for 13 weeks, there's going to be books that's going to be read. There's going to be small assignments that's going to be given. And you're basically, you that are here today, when you're done, you're going to receive a certificate, and you will have the beginning knowledge to be able to help train someone else in soul winning. 13 weeks. All right? And what would happen in a church if they just had 4 trained, committed soul winners? What would happen if they had 8? So this starts off very small. One person training one person. That's 2, 13 weeks. Well, if you go another 13 weeks, those 2 each train someone. Now at the end of half a year, 26 weeks, you've got 4. At the end of the next 13 weeks, you're only going to have 8, but you've got 8. After that, you've got 16. After 1 year, you'd have 16. Can I tell you, most churches do not have 5 trained soul winners, much less 16. 16. That every day of their life, when they're at the grocery store, work, job, they're trying to win someone. What would that do for your church? What would that do for your community? See, this is what Operation Go is based on, and I'm just giving you a little, so as I make statements, maybe some of it will make sense, and by the time we're done, hopefully it will all make sense. But it has, soul winning must be a priority. It can't just be, well, we're going to do it if we can, all right? The pastor's role. It's paramount the pastor understands the soul winning club. He has to know its approach, the starting of the club. Jesus was willing to invest himself in those disciples, in these men, in order that they be trained to become personal soul winners. Jesus spent 40 days doing nothing else but training them in how to win someone else and how to get the gospel. He discipled them for 3 years of his ministry. But he invested in those men in order that they could be trained to become personal soul winners and in the foundation of the work that he was doing. So it's with the pastor who recognizes his role in building men and women into personal soul winners. It's also very important that the pastor be involved in each soul winning club and session, or make sure that he's present when the soul winning director leads it. Very important. Everything rises and falls on leadership. The pastor does not have to be the soul winning director, but he does need to have a visible presence to let them know, I am not only behind this, this is my heart, this is my passion. The director and the pastor must, of course, share the same burden and passion for souls. This is what you're looking for in a pastor and a soul winning director. They've got to be in one accord. All right, now if you don't get all these blanks, I'll have my book laying up here for you to go back, but hopefully you're able to get those. Time sessions to make sure we can get through everything, so if you don't get a blank, you will be able to get it at the end of each session, okay? Let's see, yeah. As a soul-winning director, I've never known of a greater opportunity than the soul-winning club to build leaders out of the church family. Like anything else, most of the time when you invest this amount of time and energy into something, you're not only going to develop a soul winner, but because of the intricate nature of the way Operation Go works, you're going to develop leaders, you're going to develop people that disciple people and pray with them and help them in many other areas. But I want you to think with me for a moment. Imagine what, I'm going to leave that there till I get to it. Imagine what would happen if each deacon, Sunday school teacher, usher, choir member went through an intensive soul-winning training course such as this. I had a rule for my choir members, for choir, to sing in the choir. We had, I don't know, about 50, 60 in our choir. And my rule was, if you didn't go soul-winning that week, you didn't sing in the choir. I didn't want you up there leading in worship as a choir, and you didn't even care about the people sitting out in the community. You say, preacher, that's harsh. That was my rule. If you taught in our Christian school, if you worked in ministry, if you were an usher and took up an offering, if you blew your nose as a staff member of Emmanuel Baptist Church, you went soul winning once a week. Minimum. Now, I had people that couldn't be there on Thursday night or Wednesday during the day or on Saturday. That was fine. They could partner up with someone. They could fill out a sheet saying that they went soul winning. I was perfectly fine with that. But why have we settled? I know churches that say, well, if you sing in the choir, you have to be faithful. That's good. If you sing in the choir, you have to wear such and such, okay? But what about soul winning? How important should soul winning be in a church? You couldn't work in my sound booth if you didn't go soul winning. I didn't want you sweeping the floors of the church if you didn't go soul winning. Soul winning ought to matter. It has to be prioritized, and it has to be pushed from the pulpit. What an opportunity you and I can have. If we trained everyone, not only would each one understand the heart of the church and its pastor, but he or she would also have received instruction in all areas of ministry in the church, and would correctly understand that all of those areas contribute to the operation of the ministry. So we're building leaders through a soul winning club. It's not just let's go soul winning, and we'll explain that. The Operation Go is not just going to give you trained soul winners. It's going to build leaders within your church to do many other things for you. The director must understand the soul-winning plan so well that he can communicate all of its importance and procedures to the trainees, yet still be able to teach it in a simplistic manner. Memorize the 13-point plan. All right? The director has to understand the soul-winning plan. It is extremely important to use much repetition while teaching the 13-point plan in each session. I told you I drill my kids regularly, going to school, at the dinner table, during devotions. I'll just holler out, Hannah, step 8. Levi, step 2. And they got to tell me what those are quickly without even being able to think about it. Preacher, can you do it? Yes. I've got them all memorized, front, backwards, middle, behind. That is the core. And listen, not that I'm anything. I've been preaching a good while. I've been in ministry, full-time ministry, over 30 years. Not as long as some, longer than others. But can I tell you, when I go out soul winning, I don't vary my method. When I'm teaching you, listen, I could go to Genesis and I could talk about Isaac being offered on the altar, and I could give the gospel through that. I could go to Exodus and the Passover. But when I soul win, I use the same method I'm teaching you. Why? It works. I'm comfortable. I know it. Why vary? I don't need to learn 1,000 verses and be able to go from Genesis to Revelation to lead someone to the Lord. Those verses in Romans work perfect. I win people to Christ the same way my 9-year-old daughter does. I'm a preacher. I know the Bible. I read my Bible through several times a year. And I'm not bragging on any of that. I'm just saying, but I've learned that repetition keeps you comfortable and it helps you do it more effectively and more consistently. So repetition is very important, that 13-point plan. Okay? The entire importance of soul winning in general needs to matter. I think some of the preachers here know Brother R.B. Willett. He's a dear friend. Brother Willett pastored the First Baptist Church of Bridgeport for 40-something years. Turned it over a couple years ago to his assistant, Brother J.D. Howell, who's a very close friend. That's where our membership is. Brother Willett had, and we still have, the largest independent Baptist church in the state of Michigan. It is a soul-winning church. People are won to Christ every week. Brother Willett is a soul winner. He is an encouragement. He never is out. Even now, he travels all over the country. He's gone every week somewhere preaching. But once a week when he's in, he finds time to go soul winning at least 2 hours with someone in the church, even to this day. He's done that all his life. He never is anywhere that he doesn't win someone. He's just a great soul winner. When I come to First Baptist Church of Bridgeport, I wanted to be there, and I wanted my membership there because I knew the Lord was going to have me take this ministry, and I wanted to be in a church that emulated what soul winning was. My pastor seen Operation Go. Brother J.D. and Brother Willett seen it. They had known of Brother Wood, but didn't really know him greatly. And when they seen the program, first thing my pastor said is, I want you and Brother Wood to come in, and I want you to do just what I'm doing today, last night and today, conference at our church. We're going to invite all the Michigans, all the churches in Michigan to come, and we had tons of churches there, had a great attendance. And J.D. said, I want all of our programs I want it to change. I want everything Operation Go. In a church that was already a soul-winning church. Because he's seen the repetition. Because though we were a soul-winning church, Brother Willett may have won people one way. J.D. may have won someone another way. The youth pastor may have done it another way. Brother J.D. said, I want consistency. And we have about 10 soul-winning directors in our church. 10. We have a soul-winning director for the seniors, soul-winning director for the teens, soul-winning director for this. We have 10. He had me train 10, and I'm supposed to be the soul-winning director for First Baptist Church of Bridgeport. Pretty much those guys run it, and if they have questions, they ask me. It's the way it works. But we've got 10 soul-winning directors, and everybody from the kids all the way to the seniors of seniors is using Operation Go. In a soul-winning church is already winning people to Christ. Why? They've seen that the repetition and everyone learning the exact same way, and it has helped our church. Brother J.D. said, Brother Brian, I'm convinced that we're growing, and even when many churches are not, because of what the Lord's doing with Operation Go. Even in a soul-winning church, an established program, teaching people the same thing, using consistency, using repetition, it works. Now, effective communication, page 4, between the pastor and the soul-winning director is a must, or the club will not grow and produce. Each session gives the pastor an excellent opportunity to build church loyalty. Each session gives the pastor an excellent opportunity to build church loyalty, to stir up a wholesome spirit of excitement. Your blank there, excitement. And to address all key areas in the church ministry so that his people develop a spirit of oneness. Now, you and I need to understand that as a leader, it's important for you and I not to see our own success, but for us to focus on the success of others. And what Operation Go does is not focus on me, but it focuses on me helping someone else become successful as a soul winner. And being able to be right in it. A person who who is happy is not because everything is right in their life. They're happy because their attitude towards everything in their life is right. And what better way to have a joyful, happy life than to do that through soul winning? All right? Now we're going to move on to section number 2, and then we'll take about a 5-minute break. Let you rest your legs. And we're going to be stopping for lunch about 12 o'clock or so don't get nervous. We will stop and have a time of eating and so forth. But I want you to look at section number 2. On page number 5 is where we're at. We're going to look at weekly soul winning in the field. You know, I have found that it's not just people. I've found that many times preachers are intimidated by soul winning. Oftentimes, the truth of the matter is, many times pastors and churches do not want to put in the effort, the work, and the energy to have a thriving, growing church. God gave the illustration, and it's a good one. Jesus in Corinthians, Paul in Corinthians, Jesus in the Gospels likened Christianity to a new birth and to being an infant, did he not? Now, I think I know a little something about babies, with my wife having birthed 9 of them, and us having 9 children in the home. Babies are work. I'm thankful my wife just wanted to, she works very hard. She never has had a public job, but she works from our home and is a homemaker and works very hard. She's raised our children and done an amazing job. I'm thankful I got to get out of the house every day. I would have gone nuts trying to take care of all them kids. And there's times she had to leave, and if I got a phone call, I'm done. I do not multitask well in that area. If I'm on the phone, I'm talking on the phone. The kids could be setting the house on fire, and I'm not paying attention. Dirty diapers, feeding, just babies are work. And you understand, new converts are work. You know, I've been in churches, literally, all across the country. This sounds bad, but it's just true. I don't know if it's true in Canada, but it is in America. That they like that they can go sit in the same spot every service. That's their pew. Yeah. That's their chair. They've sat there for 20 years. They like that they know everybody in the church. There's a comfort level. We're just one big family. And honestly, they don't want the boat to get rocked. What? Bring in 15 new people? There's many churches that are content to sit right there with the group they've got and die. Can I tell you one of the greatest things I loved about Emmanuel? On any given Sunday, you never knew who was going to be there, how many people were going to be there, and I was having to learn names every week. Absolutely loved it. Babies can be work. They make messes. They spit up. You get ready for church. You're holding, the wife says, here, hold the baby. And then they spit all over your suit and shirt, and you got to go change. And babies are work. And unfortunately, many people do not want to be a soul winner or have soul winning in their church the way it needs to, because it's a lot of work. It gets messy. Do y'all realize sin messes everything up? So now we live in a day where we've got multiple homes within a home. You know, you've got mixed homes. You've got kids from this parent but not from this parent, and that's just become normal. And you've got people with former spouses here or there, and you've got baggage that comes with this or that. And are we willing to deal with it, or do we just want the people that look clean, look good when they come in, and it's not going to cause us any problems? Young Christians need a lot of attention. When I mean young, I don't mean in age. I'm talking about in infancy of their growth. They need the attention many times. And so many times churches or pastors or people do not want to work or don't want a soul winning club because it's a lot of work. They're messy. But the Great Commission says that we ought to try to win everyone and teach them to win someone. So taking on soul winning and taking new converts, you know, many times as independent Baptists, I don't know again how it is in Canada. I'll look to the 4 men that are pastors. In the States, if you take any kind of stand at all, you're viewed almost as a cult. If you stand against abortion, if you believe marriage is between a man and a woman, if you don't think a girl ought to become a guy and a guy ought to become a girl, you're viewed as, whoa, they don't love anybody. Y'all have that problem in Canada, or is it just in America? Okay? If you have any kind of standards before long in the community, well, you can't go to that church if you do this or you do that, or if you wear this or if you wear that. You can't go to that church. Y'all ever have that problem? You want to know what fixes that in a community quicker than anything? Soul winning. When they see you out in the community, when they see you at the gatherings, when they see you at the festivals, when they see you at the county fairs, when they see you out on the streets, when they see you talking to people and caring about people and trying to get anyone and everyone in your church, it eliminates that idea in the community that church don't care. They may not like what you stand, but they won't be able to say you don't care. Soul winning fixes that. And the gospel is only good news if it gets to people in time. Does them no good otherwise. So, coming back to section number 2, you need to understand that 2 possessions are going to consume you every day of your life. Your goals or your obstacles. I want to say that again. 2 possessions is going to consume you every day of your life. Your goals or your obstacles. Which one are you going to focus on? Because you can't focus on both. Many times when it comes to soul winning programs, we choose to focus on the obstacles, so we never let it be what God wants it to be. Well, we're too small, or our community don't have a lot of people, or you don't understand where we live, or you don't understand the dynamic. The Bible doesn't change for Canada, America, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea. The commandments are still the same. It works worldwide. And so, in section 2 in the following paragraphs, there's some practical thoughts that just have to do with soul winning. Sometimes we have trouble knowing when, where, how to visit. Other questions come to mind, such as, where do I get prospects? Each soul winning director ought to develop their own ideas in these areas, but hopefully these paragraphs are going to help you in some of that. So, weekly soul winning in the field. When to visit. There are 3 hours per week of visitation required on the part of the trainee. We're going to say more about that, but understand that for Operation Go to be successful, for 13 weeks. Now, for me personally, when I started Operation Go in my church, it did not work to run 13 consecutive weeks. 4 times 13 is 52, which means there was no break, no room for any error at all. I just knew realistically there was no way that we could do 4 13-week periods back to back to back. So I decided we would do 3 13-week periods throughout the year, looking at the church calendar, figuring in Christmas and figuring out when that worked. Okay, you have to figure out what works. But for that 13 weeks, once you start for 3 hours, so you may have to consider Canada and winter and and snow, and in Michigan we have to consider that, and holidays, and when people are gone, and all these other things. So realistically, for our church, we got 3 13 weeks, and I understood by doing that, then it was going to be 2.5 years for me to see the results of what I could see in 2 years if I did 4 13-week trainings, all right? But the trainings are 13 weeks. And within that, every week, a trainer and a trainee are going soul winning 3 hours every day. I was teaching this. I taught a soul winning director down in Louisiana. And the pastor said, we need Operation Go. I preach revival for them every year, but they did not have an established soul winning program. He wanted Operation Go. They bought the program. I trained the young man. The young man actually had interned with me at my church when he was in Bible college. He had gone to Golden State, and he interned with me for a summer. Great young man from a missions family. He's on staff down at that church, and the pastor said, would you train him to be a soul winning director? I took him through this book on everything, just like I'm doing you. I just did it one-on-one. And I said, now train your wife, that way you have a trained man and a trained woman, and once they're through their 13 weeks, they're training the pastor and his wife. Because the pastor and the pastor's wife needs to go through the training just like everyone else, so they know how to train and they know how to help someone else. And so he's going to train the pastor, she's going to train the pastor's wife, and I think they're working on that now. A baby was born and is being born, and they're having to work through all that. But here's my point. His wife's dad was a deacon in their church. His wife grew up in a strong church up in Massachusetts, Independent Baptist Church. Great young lady, but she was scared to soul win. She'd never won anyone to Christ. And by this training, it forced her to have to go out 3 hours a week with her husband. And at first, he did it to teach her, and then through the training, then eventually she started. And I remember when he called me so excited that she had led her first person to Christ. I get those calls all the time. There is the greatest thing outside of you being saved, the next greatest feeling is having the privilege to watch someone else come to know Christ. Amen. There's no greater joy in your life, spiritually speaking. And so that training is to be done 3 hours. That's to be spent with the trainer doing visitation, soul winning. We're going to explain the difference. Those are not the same. Some clubs find it very effective to hold the visitation immediately after the weekly training session. However, we found it extremely wise to allow the trainer to set up a time with his trainee. And here's what we mean by that. On this one-on-one, there's going to be a set time once a week that the director is going to meet with the trainers and the trainees, and they're going to teach a lesson, going to give verses, going to give assignments. But as far as the 3 hours of when you go out, we have found it best to let that be determined by the trainer and trainee based on work and schedule and school. They may be able to go out during the day. May they have to do it at evening. They may have to do it on a weekend. I found sometimes people can do it in between services on Sunday. We let the individuals set that up. It's very flexible. Okay? This allows for differing schedules, visiting when people are actually home. In our area, there was times that we knew if we went to certain neighborhoods, they were a working class, they weren't going to be there till the evenings. There was other times it was more elderly people. We knew we could catch them in the mornings and they would be up drinking their coffee. If you waited till 7 p.m., many of them might be in bed. So you learn your area, you learn when to go, and you determine where you're going to do that. All right? Now, not only when to visit, but where to visit. Visitation, and I'm on top of page 6 where I'm at now, is going to be done from prospect cards and our door-to-door visitation. Where do prospect cards come from? I asked my people regularly, hey, if you know someone that doesn't know the Lord, you work with them, their neighbor, and you should be trying to win them, but you would like a soul winner to talk to them. I had them fill out cards, put it in a box, and that gave us instant contacts. Okay, I'm going to show you some other ways that you can do that. Obviously, anyone that visited our church. That was an instant prospect card that was going to be visited by the pastor, the soul winning director, and a soul winner, and a Sunday school teacher all that week. I'll explain more about that later. But prospects are going to come from people we meet, friends, someone we win, family members, others. All form a soul winning list that we pray over and that we develop. Soul winning director is going to develop that so that as the program grows, there's continual prospects. Okay? There's other ways. We paid, I forget, $100 or so U.S. every 3 months for a new move-in list. There's companies that will send you the list of everybody that's moved in your area every 3 months, every 6 months, or you can get it once a year. You pay $100 or so for it, but it is a wealth of information because you see their address, their name, where they're at, and you can go visit them. And then what we did was anytime we sent soul winners out with those prospects, we had a small coffee mug or a little devotional book or a $5 gift card to Tim Hortons, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, and the way we would cold call that is knock on the door. Hey, I'm Brian Treadway from Emmanuel Baptist Church. We found out you've moved in recently. We just want to say welcome to our community. Here's a $5 Starbucks. Who doesn't want a $5 Starbucks card or Dunkin' Donuts? Y'all may not have Dunkin' Donuts up here, but down where I was, it's my favorite coffee. And Tim Hortons is good too, and in Michigan it's Tim Hortons or Big B or Starbucks, and it don't matter where it comes from. The point is you're giving them something and automatically you've got an open door to talk to them. Hey, what's your church background? See how many times they'd invite you in. I told our people if it was winter or cold or raining, act cold. Even if you're not. many people will show mercy on you, say, hey, come on in, get out of the cold. Now you're inside their home and you have a chance to really talk with them. So, I would many times when a door would open, I would automatically look for something in the house and say, that is beautiful. Now in the South, Michigan's not this way. Michigan, they don't want you in their home for nothing. You're going to stand at the door pretty much. In the South, they'll invite you in, give you coffee, tea. If they've got lunch, they'll say, sit down, and you never know them before. Eat lunch with this preacher, or eat supper. Man, some of my best meals were strangers I didn't know, sitting down at the table and giving the gospel while I'm eating a biscuit. Amen? And but the point is, those prospects are going to come from many other places. You can get them, but it's your job as a soul winning director to make sure that there's places for people to go. Nothing worse than coming in. I was a member of a church years and years and years ago, visitation. I wasn't over it and in charge of it, and the guy'd come in, and I was an assistant pastor, and but someone else was over that, and okay, where do y'all want to go today? Or laid anything on your heart? Horrible way to do. There needs to be structure and organization, and so those prospects can come from many different places. That's healthy soul winning with good prospecting. Converts that get saved. Anytime someone got saved, I immediately said, can you give me 5 or 10 names of people that need the Lord and their number and address to where we can talk with them? What better way to find people that need the Lord from someone that just recognized they needed the Lord? So there's many ways to get those contacts, okay? When you're out soul winning, who does the talking? It's the job of the trainer to train his or her trainee. Therefore, the trainee will listen to the trainer, make all gospel presentations in the home for the first few weeks. Now, eventually, the trainee is going to do that, but to begin with, the trainee is going to listen to the trainer for the first few weeks of that 13-week program. If you note at the bottom, I'm going to deal with this now, sometimes you'll find that the trainees had a lot of experience in visitation. Maybe they think they're better than the trainer. I've had that happen. I warned the pastor that's going to be trained by his assistant pastor. I said, brother, he's young. You've been in ministry many years. But if you want him to train you, then you have to let him do it. And you have to be quiet until it's your turn. That difficult. He said, I can do it. And he has. So sometimes you're going to have someone that says, like that deacon, I don't need this. I know what I'm doing. I'll do it. Well, remember, what we're doing is we're training, even though you may be a better soul winner maybe than the trainer, we're teaching people the same way so that everyone is consistent and the soul winning program is consistent from the high up to the lowest person in there. Everyone is doing it the same way, training the same way, so it's very important the program be followed. Does that make sense? It's not a knock on you to be trained because you may have led more people to Christ than the one training you, but we all want to be trained in the exact same way so that there's consistency within the program and that God can use that repetition to make a difference in someone else's life. Because when you go to train someone, then you got to do it the same way that you were trained. So that's the way it was when I trained disciplers. We had discipleship every Wednesday night in our church, and I one-on-one, we led in song and we did prayer and then opening announcements, and then about 15 minutes into the service, everyone that was being trained one-on-one, they slipped out into different rooms and areas by themselves. But before I ever did that, I took 13 weeks and took them through the Continue book of Brother Chappell, and I taught that, and I had Christians that had been saved longer than I had been in ministry. But I said, I'm training you and I'm teaching you this so you'll know how I want you to do it when you start training. Does that make sense? So the training's very important. So even though someone may have a lot of experience in visitation or a lot of experience in soul winning, and we'll come back to that here in just a moment. Look in that paragraph. After this observation season is passed, the trainee should make a presentation once in a while the trainer making observations, and giving advice after they leave the home. Notice after is in dark there. What are you saying? You never want to embarrass the person you're training, or never want to fix or correct something they did in front of them. Do that privately. I've had a rule, I try to always discipline my children in private. You know, I don't like to be rebuked publicly, do you? So I've always tried to honor, though they're my children, I've tried to correct them in private. Now there's sometimes you just can't do it, you know. But as a general rule, I try to do that private. We're just me and them, or mom and them's the only one that knows what's going on. The same way here. I'll never forget, I was training a young man in our church. He's at Hiles Anderson now. He's a junior this year, just got engaged. One of the finest young men. If you would have met him when I met him, his family started coming to the church. Has anyone ever seen and I'm going to use secular for just a minute, but I've learned Jesus used carnal illustrations to bring spiritual truth, and I learned us Baptists get carnal illustrations really easy, okay? But anyone ever watched Andy Griffith? Yes. Do y'all remember the Darlin family on there that would be, you know, and they come on and all the guys have their instruments and they don't smile. They sit there. Okay? We had a family in our church, played banjo, fiddle, mandolin, guitar. Great family, loved the Lord. They had been in a non-denominational church that changed completely on the Bible and everything, and they started coming to our church. And their son got called to preach, and he's, like I said, he's in housing. You would have, he talks like this, and hello, brother, how are you today? Just as country as cornbread. Y'all think I've got an accent? You ought to hear him. So he wanted me to train him in soul winning. So he was my soul winning trainee. We were out one day, first time I had him out, and it was his turn to do the talking. Now, as you can tell, I talk fast. So when I knock on a door, it's, hello, I'm Brother Brian Treadway. This is Brother so-and-so. We're from Emmanuel Baptist Church, and we're out knocking doors and inviting people to church, and then I just start talking. So it was Daniel's turn. So Daniel, your door. He said, okay, preacher, I got this. He knocks on the door. About a 16, 17-year-old teenage girl answers the door. She opens the door. She says, can I help you? Daniel goes, hi. Everything in me, brother, I'm wanting to, come on. And then he says, oh, this is my pastor, Brother Brian Treadway. He's pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church. And he stops. This teenage girl, I don't know what's going through her mind.
This boy is weird.
I'm Brother Daniel. I don't know why I had to put brother in there. Daniel Rush. We're out knocking doors, and do you have a moment for us to talk? If I was that girl, I would have said no. This ain't going to be a moment. This is going to be 2 hours. And I'm sitting here in my mind, and I'm just standing, I'm smiling under my breath. I'm praying, God, please use Daniel. Please use Daniel. Please use Daniel. God, please help him. It took about 20 minutes. He fumbled. He messed up. He broke some cardinal rules. But you know what the end result was after that 20-minute visit? Daniel led that teenage girl to Christ. See, because it's not about how long it takes or our accent or whether we get it. It's about the power of God and honoring His Word as we give the gospel. We left. Daniel, he's glowing. He's excited. We get away. Well, Pastor, he put his arm around me on my shoulder. How'd I do? I said, Daniel, she got saved. Thank God. We talked. He said, is there anything that I could have done different? Now that you mention it. I worked with Daniel. I trained Daniel. Daniel's at Hiles Anderson, and one of the bus men, John Wilkerson himself, told me privately, Daniel's become a tremendous soul winner. Now when Daniel talks to someone, it's, hello, I'm Daniel. He's still got the accent. Hello, I'm Daniel Rush. I'm from Hiles-Anderson Bible College. We're out visiting and like to... He's got it. But it didn't happen overnight. Okay? So I corrected him on many, many things. But I did it privately. I did it one-on-one. And I encouraged him. Okay? So you want to make sure you do it after you leave the home. Now, we talked about the person that has a lot of experience. They think that should be able to jump right in, take the reins when presenting the gospel. That needs to be dealt with tactfully, but they need to be told that there's a standard procedure, and they need to understand that they're to follow the 13-point plan exactly as it is taught in the training session, so that they can see soul winning that wins people to Christ and bring them into the church. I remember one of the men went to my pastor there at First Baptist Church of Bridgeport, Brother J.D., one of our men that had been a soul winner, and he said, I don't need to use that, I've got my own method. Brother J.D. said, are you going to be the director? Yes, sir. He said, then you will use this method. Now, he was the pastor. He could be that blunt, that direct. The guy come to me, and he said, I just don't understand. I've won many people to Christ. What's wrong with doing it my way? I said, brother, you're a director. You're going to be training other people. Can everyone win someone to Christ the way you can? He stopped a minute. He said, no, they probably would be intimidated because... I said, exactly. I said, the reason we want you to teach it the way we teach it and use it the way is so you can help other people. I told him, I said, brother, you know the Bible. You could go from Genesis to Revelation. You could pick anywhere and you could give someone the gospel. You can answer questions. You can even debate, but that's not going to do any good. The point is, let's get them saved. And most people can't do that. And he said, you're right, Brother Treadway, I got it. He said, I got it. And he's done a great job, and he's doing it the way it ought to be done and should be done. So I'm just saying to you and I, it's very important that the procedures are followed. It works. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. We do not need to come up with 15 other ways. This works. I know it works. I use it all the time, and God blesses it, and people get saved. Now, where do we get prospects? It ought to be briefly noted, and we've talked about this, but just repetition. Prospects come from those who visit the church, from those who are family members, from surveying, and from new move-ins. Now, we also did community events. I don't know, in our county, we had a big county fair. Do they do those here in Canada or have festivals? Do you have any kind of festivals or community things that go on that a lot of people come, maybe parades, Christmas parades. Christmas parades are big in the States. In our community, where we were in Abingdon, we were close to Bristol, but we were also close to Lebanon. We put a Christmas float in all three of the parades. And we gave, last one we did was 15,000 bags that had candy, and a Christmas tract that we had made up, and information on the church in those bags, and we handed out over 15,000 between those three parades at Christmas time. We bagged all the candy, had to put all the tracts in there, all the material in there. But then also a lot of times at our county fair, we would set up a booth. We paid the $50, $75, and we had a booth. It was just a table with we had a banner made, Emmanuel Baptist Church, free water. And we gave away free bottles of water. But as we gave away free bottles of water, we also gave a little old devotion, and we had tracts, and we had information about the church, and we had information on our RU program, and we had people man that the whole time. That people signed up and took times, and they would write down names and say, hey, and we would get numbers and addresses. Guess what all that was? We're mining. We're just getting contacts. We're getting information. We did a fireworks show that was as big as the towns. And we let anyone and everyone. We did it after church on Sunday night, right around the 4th. And we had people that didn't come to church, could care less about church or preaching, but they showed up on our property for the free hot dogs, chips, and fireworks. When I first started pastoring and people did that, I got aggravated. Bless God, if they can't come to preach, and what are they doing? And then the Lord slapped me in the head and said, hey, wait a minute. You realize what this is? It's an opportunity. So we'd walk around and say, hey, we're so glad you're here. I had soul winners trained. They'd walk around and they'd say, hey, we want to just give you information on the church. We're so glad you're here. Anything we can do for you? Do you mind if we get your name and address so we can send you a thank you for coming to our 4th of July? We want to let you know of other events we got going on. We have other free food that we give away. We've got a big old barbecue. And man, you'd be shocked how many names and numbers and addresses and emails we got. All of that went into the prospect pool. There's many ways that you can get prospects. Be creative. Think outside the box. But set up a box in your local coffee shop. Free whatever that's going to grab attention. Free bike. Free scooter. We're giving that away to the name that we draw out. Put your name in and your address and your number, and if it's completely filled out, you go in the drawing and we draw one, and we're going to give that away and put that at the local coffee shop or at the restaurant where sinners come in. When you go to the grocery store and they have those free prize giveaways, or you ever been in the States, you go in a mall, sometimes they have a nice new vehicle sitting in the middle and they have a box there, and if you fill out your name and address, they're going to draw and someone's going to win that vehicle. Why are they doing that? Prospects. They're wanting to try to sell you a vehicle. We could learn a lot on how to get names by just thinking outside of the box. Every contact you get, every name you get is a chance for you to get in someone's home or talk to someone about the gospel. Be creative. There's many ways. We had no problem with having a long list of prospects at our church of people to visit. There's a lot of people in this valley. A lot of people. A lot of ways to get those names. So, do a car wash with your young people. Don't charge anything. How many people would go to a free car wash? All we want is we want to send a thank you. Can we get your name and address and number? If you have 100 cars come through the day, is it worth it if one of those people get visited that next month and get saved? Is that better than $10 for a car wash? Think outside the box, folks. There's so many ways to get numbers and contacts and names to be able to visit and to be able to share the gospel with people. So just look for those. However, as noted earlier, soul winners should always keep a card which he lists prospects for future visitation. My wife and I stopped at the Starbucks on the way here. We went through the drive-thru because we were trying to hurry and get here. I don't like to be late, and so we got here. But through the drive-thru was a very nice young man by the name of Sebastian. I'm talking about extremely friendly. Seen us dressed up and asked where we were going. Boy, what an opportunity. We're going to church. He said, you're what? I said, yes, I'm teaching and preaching today and tomorrow and the last night. He said, my parents may be there. My mama loves stuff like that. I said, you don't? He said, no, it's not my thing. I said, pulled out one of Brother Richard's tracts and I handed it to him. I said, here's the address. Let your mama know. And while you're at it, read that. It'll tell you how to know you're going to heaven. There was people behind me. I didn't have time to go through what's your church background, 13 steps. He would have got nervous. I would have got nervous when people are honking. When they're in Starbucks line, they want their coffee and they want it now. So I didn't spend it. But you know what I plan on trying to do before I leave? Going back to that Starbucks. Amen. Hey, Sebastian, did you read that tract? Is there any questions I can answer? Hey, I'd like to stay in contact. He thought it was neat, me being from Michigan and my accent. Hey, can I get you? I'd like to stay in contact. I want to send you a free gift from our ministry. Won't cost you nothing. I just want to give you something for being so kind to me. There's a contact. There's 1,000 ways to make contacts and get names that can go into your prospect list. You just have to be, you ought to be fishing. Is that not the term Jesus used? Yeah. You ought to be fishing all the time. My grandfather, when I went fishing with him, we did what he called trolling. I hated that. Because literally you just throw your line out, ride around in the boat, go slow enough until your rod about gets yanked out of the boat, pull in a fish. But you know, spiritually speaking, what we ought to be doing? Trolling. We ought to have bait out all the time. When I go in Starbucks to work, Brother Wood loved to go into Starbucks. We would be together. We would get to a Starbucks. They open about 5:30 most in the States. We'd get there when they open, and we'd stay there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and sometimes longer working, and it's a great place. But we weren't just there for the coffee. We weren't just there because we're there fishing. Have our Bibles open? You'd be shocked how many people. Is that a Bible? Well, yes, it is. I think it is. Let me check real quick. Yep, it's, and make something funny. And then get the chance to lead someone to Christ, talk to someone. In an airport, I open my Bible. When I sit down on a plane, I pull out my New Testament and flip through it, hoping the person beside me say, "Are you a Christian?" That's like saying sick 'em to a bulldog, to a preacher. There's 100 ways that we ought to be trolling. We ought to be casting the net out all the time on getting people to know the Lord. Remember, these are not just names on cards. They're souls that need to be saved. Right? The church should provide a good gospel tract for the use of all soul winners. Hey, look, the days, and I'm not trying to be, I get that there may be some places, and I'm in a lot of churches they don't have money for hardly anything, and I understand. If a black and white tract that you got to stamp the name on is the best you can do, then make that the best you can do. But it's amazing we find money for everything a lot of times but the literature that represents our church and the community. That's right. And in this day and time with Got Print and the internet, you realize you can print 1,000 tracts really cheap. Design them in full color and gloss and 2-page for about 3-4 cents a piece. Maybe 8 cents now with the cost, 10 cents. They're not that expensive. And so make sure that you represent your church well. Have you ever got anything in the mail? And I remember one time I got this same day, got the mail, and there was this black and white photocopied page of a place that wanted me to come and visit, and they were willing to give me 2 nights and 3 days. It was a timeshare thing is what it was. And it was black and white, just a photocopied page. Nothing appealing about it. It might have been a 5-star, wonderful. The same time, in the same mail, the same day, was a 4-page, full-color, glossy brochure of another place down in Florida wanting me to come, giving me 2 nights, 3 days for $99, full color. Beautiful. Pictures were amazing. Which one do you think would have interested me more? The black and white one went in the garbage immediately. The full color one I looked at. And then I threw it in the garbage because I'm not a timeshare person. I just think they waste your money, and I know that. And I know, well, you can go down and spend, yeah, but then you got to go through the 2-hour sales pitch, and I don't want to deal with it. But it was, it was so nice, it made me think, well, maybe it went in the garbage. I'm saying that we want to represent Jesus Christ the best we can. And whatever your best is, you ought to be willing to try to do that with the materials that you offer, all right? In addition, it is good to have baptism tracts, church literature, brochures. I loved walking into the foyer and singing some of the stuff that the pastor has, informative mail-outs, special events, meetings. The pastor should concentrate on producing first-class literature so that the soul winner trained in it can distribute it on the field. Can I just say a word to leaders in here and pastors? Pastor your church like the amount of people you want to have. If you have 50, don't pastor it like it's 50. If you want to run 500 or 1,000, pastor it right now like you're running 500 or 1,000. What do you mean by that? Let me give you one practical example of what I'm talking about in this context. When I first went to the church that I pastored in Emmanuel, that we grew to over 400 in an area where there was hundreds of churches, we had 20-something people on Sunday night and Wednesday night, about 40 on Sunday morning, and we didn't have but one building and a small building for a fellowship hall, and that was it. That was no other buildings on the property. They were in disarray, and they were using Fellowship Track League tracts. Now, nothing wrong with that. I love the ministry. I know the ministry, supported the ministry. But they didn't even stamp them. They just wrote Emmanuel Baptist on there and just black and white tracts. First thing I did was told I inherited 6 deacons that had been there since Moses. Now they were good men, but they didn't like to spend money. And at first, they thought their job was to tell the pastor what he could and could not spend money on. That is not a deacon's job. You will not find that nowhere in the Bible. Nowhere. As a matter of fact, people go to Acts and say those men, Stephen and those men, nowhere does the Bible call them deacons. That word diakonos can mean service. Deacon is supposed to be a servant to the pastor. He's not to tell the pastor what to do, control the pastor. He's there to work with the pastor and help the pastor. And I don't have time to get off on all that, but it took my deacons a little bit to figure that out. But what they learned about me real quick was I was going to do what I was going to do. So I told the deacons about first month being there, I said, we have no tracts with these. And I said, if we're going to win people to Christ, we got to get some good tracts. Oh, we don't have money for that. I said, yes, we do. They said, no, we don't. I said, yes, we do. And they said, well, Pastor, you're the pastor. I said, that's right. But we're in the red. I said, we're getting out of the red. Within a month, we'll be out of the red. We'll be in the black. But we're ordering 5,000 tracts. They panicked. That was Sunday afternoon. At that time, deacons' meetings was every other Sunday, 5 o'clock in the pastor's office before church. Worst time to have a deacon meeting for a pastor. Sunday. So I quit that pretty quick. Said we're doing it on a Monday night or Tuesday evening where I got time to cool and y'all got time to cool before we show back up at church. And so I got in service that night and I said, look folks, we had about 25, 30 people. I need $400. I'm willing to give the first 100. I didn't have 100. I had children. I told y'all 9 children. The church wasn't even able to pay enough to cover my bills, but they wanted a full-time pastor, but they didn't want to pay full-time salary. They couldn't, and that was fine. God would take care of me. I've never took a church based on money. I took it because it was God's will. So I said, I'll give the first 100. I need 3 more $100. Who else can give 100? I had one of them old sour deacons raise his hand. He knew what I was doing. No one else. I said, okay, how many can give $20? Had several people give 20s. How many can give 10? Got 10. And I said, bring it on up. Count it. I got the money. It's okay. We're going to be ordering 5,000 full-color, 3-page tracts with a picture of the church and the gospel and times of service. And that's what I did. Why? Because if we were going to represent ourselves well in that community, we needed something that represented our church well. We needed to show the gospel and our church mattered enough to spend just a little bit of time and money on it. You understand what I'm saying? We want first-class literature, and that's important to be able to have that and distribute that. If it's possible for many Christians and churches to get into a regular visitation program, and here's what we're talking about, visitation or soul winning. Many times these words get used interchangeably. They are not the same thing, okay? So what happens is, many times, churches get into a regular visitation program without doing any personal soul winning. A lot of times what happens is Thursday night, many times for a lot of churches in the States, Thursday night's visitation. And what happens on Thursday night is you have 5 or 6 or 7 people show up usually. And widow so-and-so is not feeling well and needs to be visited because she wasn't at church Sunday. And member so-and-so hadn't been there in 3 weeks, and so they needed to be visited. And brother so-and-so is in the hospital with having a few tests run, and he needs to be visited. And what happens is that Thursday night or even Saturday many times, people begin to visit absentees. They contact those that have visited the church, or they visit the shut-ins or the sick, and there's no concentrated soul winning that goes on. Now understand, visitation and soul winning are not the same thing. I need to get that slide so you can get those blanks. Many times what happens is they visit absentees, or they give an invitation for someone that's been there to return to the services. Now, why do people do that? Why is that what Saturday or Thursday night or Wednesday, why is that what happens many times, and why does it become that? Well, it's because most of the time people have not been trained in a definite plan. People have not been trained in a definite plan, and it's more comfortable to go visit so-and-so because you're not feeling awkward because they already know the Lord and you already know them, and so it's not awkward or embarrassing, or there's no fear or intimidation at all to go visit someone that's visited the church or a shut-in or someone that's not been there in a while. The pastor and director should make sure that they distinguish for the soul winning club as well as his church family the difference between visitation and soul winning. We had visitation. We had visitation on Thursday night. We had visitation on Saturday morning. We also had soul winning on Thursday night and soul winning on Saturday morning. We had a group that would go visiting shut-ins, first-time visitors to the church or visitors to the church, absentees, people that's backslid, others that need to be visited. Thursday night, we had a visitation team, and then we had a soul-winning team that went door to door. On Saturday, those that visited on Thursday went soul-winning on Saturday, and those that went soul-winning on Thursday, many of them went visiting on Saturday. Now, I don't care how you do it, but understand that simultaneously you need a visitation program, but you also need a soul winning program. And soul winning is not visiting the shut-ins. Soul winning is not seeing the absentees from the church or members that happen. Soul winning is getting the gospel to sinners. So you need to have established times for visitation and established times for soul winning, and we need to make sure that they stay distinguished. Visitation is needed, but if personal soul winning is neglected, the soul winning fervor and ministry of the church will be almost non-existent. It's very important that both of those go on. Basically, if I can put it this way, a good church does whatever it takes to get the job done, all right? And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take about a 5-minute break to stretch your legs. If you want to go grab a cup of coffee, use the washroom really quick. And then when we come back, we're going to do section 3. And then I'm going to do what is a church. And by that time, we'll probably be right around lunchtime, and we will stop and take lunch and then move on. So we're doing good. And we'll just keep plugging along here. So let's take about 5 minutes if you can, stretch your legs, and then we'll start right back on section number 3. We've got about an hour and 20 minutes before lunch. And I want to be able to get 2 more sessions in so we make sure we're on time and able to finish on time. So if someone could holler downstairs and tell them to come on up. We're going to start on section number 3. In that book that we gave you last night or today in your Director's Institute book, in the back should have been one of these tracts or a couple of these tracts. Our ministry prints these. We can actually print your church name and stuff on back. I keep these with me all the time. A lot of times I'm in places where there's not a church, or I'm in an airport or away to where I can still have a tract to give someone about the Lord. But so that's just something for you to consider. And then I mentioned last night, and I want to mention again real quickly and find out where I put it here. We've got one. I brought one of these with me, and this is a great series. This is our group edition training. This is great. It's 13 weeks of training. Maybe as you grow, or maybe as a Sunday school class, you want your people to learn soul winning more in depth. This has got DVD series. There's 4 CDs or DVDs on that. It comes with 20 student books as part of the cost. You get the teacher workbook, Jerusalem Factor, Fruit That Remains. All that is in this. And once you pay for this, then you have everything you need to do this. I've got one church that does it every year. I just went and helped them out and just did a Sunday for them just to encourage them. And I think he had 60-something people in this, and the pastor was teaching it himself. So this is just a group edition. It's a lot more in detail of soul winning, the 13-point plan. Each student gets a workbook, and the initial cost of this is back there on the table in Canadian dollars. But once you have this, then if you need more student workbooks, you can just go on our website and order the workbooks separately. All this, you already have the teacher's guide, you have the DVDs, you have everything you need to use again and again and again. And so this comes with 20. I brought one of those with me. If you're interested as a church or a group, that's a great way to get soul winning started. It's not Operation Go. You still need to run people through, but that would really help motivate, especially as we're coming out of winter into spring. I know several churches that have ordered that and have started it just so they can really push soul winning for the summer as they start Operation Go and get that going as well. So that group edition is great, and consider that. Okay. And now we're going to be in section number 3, and that's starting the soul winning club. And understand that when we talk about Operation Go, when I first sat down with Brother Wood and he explained it to me, I'll be honest, I thought, man, it's going to be slow, and I like things fast. I want to do things, But at the end of the day, I come to the conclusion that I wanted to build something long term. Anything else is a distraction. So sometimes you have to be willing to go slow to get what you want. And we have to be willing to invest ourselves, and the whole concept of Operation Go is investing yourself in others so that they can fulfill the Great Commission and win someone. Leadership, there's a lot of definitions of leadership. At the end of the day, leadership is influence. But leadership is also the capacity to translate vision into reality. Leadership's not about titles, it's not about positions, it's not about flow charts. It's about one life influencing another. That's what leadership is, and that's what Operation Go does, is help build leaders not just in soul winning but in any other area. So on the start of the soul winning club, when preparing to launch the first soul winning club, the soul winning director should listen to the soul winning CDs that's part of the kit, memorize the 13-point plan. In addition, you should study the soul winning plan as it is written. Know the 13-point plan, because that's how we present the gospel to those that are lost. It is the key. Now, is 13 points the only way for it to be done? No, that's not what we're saying at all. But what we are saying is we had to have something. I remember years ago I read a man's soul winning plan, and it was 50-something points. How are you supposed to remember that? I do good sometimes remember my kids' names. Jonathan, Hannah, you know who you are, come here. And I've got 9. So you memorize the 13-point plan. We're not saying that it's magic. We're not saying it's the only way to do something. But what I am saying, it's been tested and tried for 40 years and it's worked. We have thousands upon thousands of churches across the world, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands that use Operation Go and have used it successfully. I could take you to church in Augusta, Georgia, by a man by the name, he retired and then he passed away just recently, Larry Brown. Larry Brown pastored a phenomenal work. But Larry Brown was a great preacher, but he did not have the time or want to take the time to deal with soul winning, but he knew how important soul winning was. So his brother was a member of his church. His brother, and Operation Go was used in another church for the first time in Larry Brown's church in Augusta, Georgia. Brother Wood trained, Brother Larry's brother, trained him in Operation Go, and he started using Operation Go. That church runs around 4,000 people. And Larry Brown, before he passed, would tell you the reason that church is the size it is not because of him or his preaching, it's because of his brother and soul winning. And his brother in 30 years personally trained over 500 soul winners. Phenomenal man. You'll never hear his name. He's not in the spotlight. Larry got all the credit and the glory, and the pastor and the preacher, and preached all over the country. But his brother Joe is one of the finest Christians and soul winners you'd ever meet, and has a passion for what he's doing. We have Operation Go all over, but you got to be willing to, it works, and you got to be willing to do it. We're not saying we're the only plan or the 13 points is the only way, but what I am saying, for 40 years it's been tested and tried, and it works. I know it works. I know it works because in my church I had tried everything. I believed in soul winning, was trying to get soul winning. I made so many mistakes. I won't even get into all that, and I tried to using different programs. Brother Chappell said, get my Seek and Save. So I got the Seek and Save, which is a great thing, but it's about 12 weeks, and on Sunday afternoons I met with our people for 45 minutes before Sunday night service, and I took them through to Seek and to Save, and I tried something from Sword of the Lord, and I tried something else from Brother Hudson, and I tried, nothing seemed to stick. And I couldn't put my finger on what was going on. So when a preacher friend called me and said, hey, you'll never guess you joined my church, Brother David Wood. I said, well, I've heard the name, but I don't really know him. Who is he? And he told me, and he said, he's got a soul winning plan. I said, look, I've tried all that. He said, you need a meeting. You and him would get along. So I met Brother Wood. He presented his ministry to me as he was passing through, stopped by, secretary scheduled an appointment, and he and I had coffee together. And as I talked with him, I was a little skeptical, and he said, well, I'm going to New Zealand here in a few months. And he said, I'll be doing my program. I said, I said, you're going to New Zealand? He said, yeah. I said, I'm going with you. He said, do what? I said, my church covers all my expenses and will cover. I said, I'm going to New Zealand. I want to see what you're doing. I want to see it in person. I want to see what you do overseas. So I did. I had my secretary book my tickets and my hotel and my rental car, and I went to New Zealand. After watching what he did and the conference that he held, one just like this, a Friday night, Saturday, and he had two other days because he was training in church planning as well. I was blown away. I told him, I said, I need you in my church as soon as you can give me a Sunday and a Saturday. I want you to come in, and I want you, what we call a 21st century soul winning is what I did for you last night. For a lot of churches, that's how we start, is just get in, at least teach soul winning to people so they can start winning someone, and then try to introduce Operation Go and come back and do what I'm doing today. And so I had Brother Wood in on a Saturday. He took 3 hours. He did the 13-point. He did the Jerusalem factor. We had about 100-something people there that Saturday morning. And it changed my church. That first week, people made commitments, just like I asked you to make commitments. That first week, I had 20 people that had never led anyone to Christ outside of the church led someone to Christ. That next Sunday, we baptized 15 people. All had been led by first-time soul winners. It stuck. I had people not only getting people saved, but staying with them until they got baptized. And in the next 10 months, our church grew about 100 people. Now, we had many more saved than that. When I mean grew, I don't mean just people saved. I mean people saved, baptized, and going through our 13-week one-on-one on Wednesday night discipleship program and joining our church, we grew over 100 in 10 months. I watched what this program did for my church. We were in an area where we were gospel hardened. Everyone, you knock on, I told you, 20-mile radius, 100 independent Baptist churches all around us. But there were still sinners and there were still people that need to be saved. And I'm just telling you, it works. I know it works because as a pastor, long before I become president of Operation Go, I watched what God did in our church, and I watched how it revolutionized my church, and I watched how it gave people confidence. And I'm excited about it, and I'm sold on it because as a pastor, I watched what it did for my people. It works. So, but the soul winning director, when I first started, I told Brother Wood, I said, the only thing I don't like is I want to start fast. He said, start slow. So I trained my assistant. And then once you have an assistant trained, 2 men, then train wives. And then now you have 2 ladies that can train 2 other ladies, and 2, or a husband train a wife. And then that way a husband can train a man after that, and a lady can train, because obviously that's best way to do it. And so there's all kinds of things that I could say about this, but what I want you to understand is we're not saying this is the only way to do it. We're not saying this is the only plan, but what I'm telling you is I could take you all across the country. I could take you to Brother Benny Abante's in the Philippines, the first church in the Philippines to use Operation Go, and still uses it. Now Brother Abante's son, Brother Abante, preached in the Asia, there in the Philippines, the Spiritual Leadership Asia. He's a personal friend of mine. He pastors the largest independent Baptist church in Manila. And he will tell you the reason it's as large as it is and it's been successful as it is because of Operation Go. His son is now fixing to become my director in the Philippines. Our director's been Brother Joey Sacco. He's moving up as a regional director for Southeast Asia as we've grown. And VOG is being trained by Brother Joey right now, and then his final training will go by me when I can get there later in the year. And VOG is going to be our Philippine director. And he's got saved and loves the Lord and called to preach. And he believes Operation Go is where he's supposed to work and wants to be the director. And it's because he watched what it did in his dad's church at the time, was running 50 to 75 people, and now runs thousands upon thousands upon thousands. Brother Chappell preached there Sunday afternoon right before the Spiritual Leadership Asia Conference. I was supposed to preach there, but because of my dad's sickness, I wasn't able to go. So I teased Brother Abante. I said, you had to go get the second best after I could. And then I was teasing. Brother Chappell's far greater than I will ever be, and I was teasing Brother Chappell as well. But Brother Chappell wound up preaching. I'm just saying, that church will tell you it is what it is because of Operation Go, and it's still in existence. I could take you to Brother Thomas's church in India. Don't have time. He's our Indian director. We have an office in all 36 states in India, and a director in all 36 states in India, and an orphanage and a Bible college and a training center in India, and we're vested in India, and it's amazing what God done. But I could take you to Brother Thomas's church that had 30 people when he took over for his dad, and a long story about how he wound up well, I will tell you because it's just too good to not, and I'll make the time. But Brother, our ministry, Brother Wood, for years and even now, we get contacts. People get your name overseas, national pastors, preachers. They send you emails all the time. Hey, could you come over and help? Could you come? Sometimes they're Baptist, sometimes they're charismatic, they're ecumenical, all these things. And so, pretty much you just have to ignore it because we're so busy. We can't take all the emails. And a lot of them, they're just trying to get money out of you. And I get it. They're nationals. They have nothing. So Brother Thomas had emailed Brother Wood several times, and Brother Wood did like we still have to do, just kind of ignored it and deleted it. Well, somehow Thomas lost or missed out on the contact that he had for Brother Wood several years past. Thomas was discouraged. Small church, he took over for his dad. 30, 40 people. And Thomas was walking, and he's given this testimony himself, was walking in the streets one day and seen something on the ground, and when he picked it up, it was that "Are You Sure" tract that you have with Brother Wood's number and address on it. And it's like the Lord said, call him. Thomas called Brother Wood. We're not sure how the tract made it over there because Brother Wood had not been in India at all at that point. Not sure, other than the Lord. Thomas got the number, called Brother Wood, said, "I'm the one that's emailed you. I really want you to come." Brother Wood finally wound up going over there. And today, Thomas has one of the largest churches in India in one of the poorest provinces. Is our director in India, travels all over India teaching pastors. Has done an amazing work, and Brother Thomas will tell you it's because of Operation Go. Whether it's in the States, in the Philippines, I could take you to Brother Rudy's church in El Salvador, where churches do not grow that big, and he's got one of the largest in El Salvador, and he'll tell you it's because of Operation Go. Now, I don't say that to lift us up. I just say that to say this works. We're not saying we're the only ones, but what I am telling you is, as a pastor, I tried everything, but this gave my people, and this program gave us what we needed to move forward, and I believe it'll do the same for you. Now, how do you select trainees? I think I didn't finish. In addition, he should study the soul winning plan as it is written, is the other blank there, study. It's vitally important to use much patience when selecting the first trainees for the soul winning club. Now, I just told you how it operates: one trainer, one trainee. You want to make sure that you're very selective in who you begin with, all right? Of course, the first session should include only the director and one or two others in order to gain a solid foundation. Why is it important of who you choose? Well, you want to choose someone that's going to stay committed, that's not going to quit, that's not going to get discouraged. You want someone that's going to have some excitement about them, someone that's going to be vested. You want it to succeed. And if you start with someone that's half in, half out, one pastor that I was talking to said, "Well, I don't really have a lot of choices. I'm just going to have to use that someone and hope for the best." I said, don't start it yet till God gives you someone then that you know is going to stick with it. Better to wait than for it to fail at the beginning and the church see, what's the point? Are you to get discouraged? So who you start with is very important, and you want a solid foundation, all right? It's suggested that only men be used at first, not because men are more important than ladies, but because of leadership within a church. What I suggest is that two men get trained, pastor, assistant pastor, or pastor and the soul winning director, whoever that's going to be first. And then those two train their wives, and then now you have ladies training ladies, men training men. Obviously, a husband can train a wife, a brother could train a sister, but in the family, obviously, you want to be careful because they're spending one-on-one time and all those other things. So that's why we suggest that to be first. After the first trainees have become trainers, the club has been held for 2 or 3 sessions. Ladies can be taken to the club, letting some of the men train their wives. If a capable lady soul winners in the church family, a separate lady soul winning club could be started at the same time as the men's. In other words, figure out what works for you, what needs to be done, and it does not matter. But obviously, you want to be able to train one-on-one. There's a lot of private time, individual time, so you got to be careful there. The director should only take Christians who have a willingness and a desire to become great soul winners. You realize great leaders do not set out to become great leaders. They set out to make a difference. For a great leader, it's never about the role. It's always about the goal that they're trying to achieve. And what we're trying to achieve is duplicating ourselves so that more people can be saved, more people can become know the Lord. So you want people with a desire. If you have to beg, plead, or volunteer someone to start, you're probably better off waiting. You want people that are energetic and enthusiastic coming to you saying, I've learned a long time ago that people will volunteer themselves, people will commit themselves, people will recruit themselves. And that's what you're looking for, someone that has a passion, they may not have everything in the row together. They may not have all their ducks in a row. They may not even know where their ducks are at. But you want someone with a passion for souls. All right? Note if the director chooses to train more than one man in his first session, he should visit 3 hours per week with each trainer if at all possible. I have a great friend in South Carolina, Pack-a-Lot, South Carolina, Brother Bill Pickle. That is his name. Not Dill Pickle, but Bill Pickle. His parents did not love him, is all I can say. Brother Bill is a phenomenal guy. Love him. He's a soul winner, loves soul winning, but he did not have Operation Go in the church and needed it. So he had me come and teach Operation Go and teach soul winning to his church. And he said, Brother Brian, I'm going to train 2 people. I said, Brother Pickle, you're a pastor. You stay busy. It's a lot of work. He said, I know, but I'm going to do it. He called me about midway through. He trained 2 men, which meant he had once a week meet with them about an hour and a half, because he started out being a soul winning director. He wanted to train 2 because he wanted one to become the soul winning director and already wanted to have another one to start. He wanted to jump start the program, and so that's why he did it that way. So he had an hour and a half each week. He had to meet with both of them and teach them the lesson and watch the DVD and do the assignments and other stuff. But then each week he had 3 hours he had to go visiting with this guy. 3 hours he had to go visiting with this guy. That's 6 hours a week. Now, I don't know how pastors are up here, but I assume they're like every other pastor. That's a lot of time to carve 6 hours extra out of your schedule. That's a lot of time. So we recommend one person training one person and 3 hours. But if you do 2, and I would not ever recommend you do more than 2, understand that's 3 extra hours. You can't just say, well, I'm going to take both of you at one time. No, you're missing the whole point. Part of the program is discipling and building a leader, building that one-on-one. It has to be done separate, okay? So after the first session has started, no additional trainees should be taken into the club. A waiting list can be started. They can be taken in under a trainer for the next session or your soul winning club. It's going to start slow, but it will grow. So put them on a waiting list, get that group addition, do a 13-week soul winning Sunday school class for those that want to attend, and they'll already have some basics, already be grounded. They can already be winning people to Christ. That group edition, I strongly recommend it for a church. That kids edition that we have, 10 books come with it. I think I've got it up here somewhere. I don't remember where I put it, but it comes with 10 books. It comes with everything you need to run a Sunday school program for kids in teaching them. Do not discount children. Well, you have to be an adult to lead someone to Christ. I don't find that in the Bible. My children have led adults that are grandparent age to Christ. Well, how do you know it's real? They're using the same verses, the same plan, the same statements, and they've got the same Jesus and the same Holy Ghost that I've got. Why can't they? Okay? So that's a great program, but once a session started, then you just kind of put people on a waiting list. Eventually, you'll be able to get them, and you can discern what you're going to do. Let me go back here. Those who are placed on a waiting list can still be trained by placing them in a Sunday school class called Soul Winning Fundamentals. That's that group edition that I told you about. That 13-week video-taught Sunday school class will teach them the 13-point plan, many of the memory verses, the overall philosophy, and the importance of personal soul winning. There's nothing more important outside of salvation you can be teaching your people than how to win someone to Christ. Make it a priority. Okay? The meeting place. When the club additionally begins, it may be small. The meeting place can be a local restaurant. That gives everyone a chance to fellowship together. However, as your club gets larger with each 13-week session, it'll probably have to meet in a well-lit room in a church building. Of course, the club can be initiated to meet there in the local church, and it continue there throughout its growth. So your blanks on page 11 is room, a well-lit room, and the club can be initiated to meet there in the local church. Look, this is very flexible. You figure out what works for you with the facilities. When I took over Emmanuel, we had a nice big sanctuary, but when they built the sanctuary, they built it with one thing in mind: packing people in for preaching service. They did not think of Sunday school. They did not think of nurseries. They did not think of extra ministries. And we had to think outside of the box to figure out how we were going to make our space work. And we did. So just do what you got to do. On ordering materials, it's very important that all materials needed for the first session of the club be ordered immediately. Now, when you get the Operation Go kit, you automatically get the trainer's guide and the trainer that the soul winning director gets. You get the soul winning director's guide, and the soul winning director gets the books that's going to be read through that 13 weeks and looked at. But you also get the trainer's guide and a set of books for the trainer. So you're already set up for the first session, all right? Unless the very exuberant and very energetic, and you're going to train one more person, then you'd have to order one more guide and one more set of books. All these can be ordered from our website there, but the director's guide and everything you need to run the program, you don't have to ever order again. You have everything you need. And those that have the program, when we get this digital, and I'm hoping to do that this year, then you will get free access by already having the program to the digital versions of everything that's in the program on DVD now. What that means is with digital, then you can watch it from an iPad, from a computer, from your phone, just makes it a whole lot easier, and that's coming. It's very expensive to get all that done over. With Brother Wood's passing, we're having to sell the building and our headquarters in South Carolina, and we've moved it to Michigan. It's now a ministry of First Baptist Church of Bridgeport. And we just closed on a building last week about half a mile from our church that we've bought. But we've got to sell the building down there, and then we'll have to use that money to remodel the one. It's a nice building, but I've got to make it into offices, put a studio in there for digital, and just a lot of work that's got to be done. But that's coming, and those that have the Operation Go will automatically get all the access to the digital things free of charge for already having the program. So again, we're not out about making the money. We're out about making sure you have access to the materials, okay? At the back of this, there's an order form. You can also, again, online at our website, operationgointernational.com. All of that can be ordered and sent right away, all right? Now, here's a note. This is the kit right here. I've already talked about it, so I'm not going to try to go through that again. A note about money. It's highly encouraged for the club to have each trainee pay for his or her own materials at the beginning of each session. I learned a long time, I had to learn this the hard way as a pastor. If you give something free, many times it's not as appreciated as much. It's not took care of as much. Any of you feel like your kids think money grows on trees when they're young? And then they start getting that job and they see how many hours it takes for them just to make a little bit of money, and their whole concept changes of what money is. Okay? I think what I did and what I think you ought to do is, and you'll see the cost of what it costs this. For a trainee, you say, here's the cost, and you get your guides, you get your books, and they're yours to keep. And that way there's no expense to the church. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's amazing. Our school, our Christian school our kids go to at our home church, they have sporting events and other events, and even during the day you have to bring your lunch, but they have fountain drinks, sodas and things that you can buy, or at the beginning of the year you can purchase a Bridgeport Baptist Academy cup. It's a plastic 32-ounce cup, and if you buy that, then you get drinks all year free as long as you use that cup. It's amazing. I make my kids pay for their own cup, because it is the cheaper way to do it, because it's like $1.50 at lunchtime. But then if you go to, several of our kids play sports for the Christian school, and you go to events at the church, and it's $1 for a drink here, and y'all remember how many kids I got, that adds up quick. So you pay $20 or $25 for this cup. It's amazing. I make my kids pay for it. It's amazing. They can't tell you where their underwear is, their socks are. They can't tell you where their computer is because our high school uses Chromebooks for their most of their work. And they can't tell you where none of that stuff is, but they can tell you where that cup is. Why? They paid for it. It's their money that went into that cup. And so we've just learned that now if someone does not absolutely have the money, then absolutely help them or say, hey, give $5 a week till you pay for your materials. But that's very important. By doing this, the church is totally reimbursed for all materials, and you're building a soul winning program at no cost to you other than the initial expense of the club startup. All right? Setting up communication on top of page 12. The director will want to make sure that a clear line of communication is set up between him and all the trainees of every session. In addition, all files in the office should be established and maintained so that accurate records are kept of each trainer and his trainee. Very important. I see so many churches that are so unorganized, they can't tell you how many people they had won, how many people they witnessed to, how many homes. You ought to keep very detailed records. Okay, very important. There is too many programs out there today and church management software that even for a small church, again, I never finished that statement. If you want to pastor 1,000, then run your church like 1,000. And I never finished that statement. I started off small. And with just a few people, I told y'all how I ordered those tracts. One of the other things I did was I started very early on. I said, okay, I want a map of our facilities. Well, we didn't have a campus like West Coast or Golden State or First Baptist Church of Hammond. We were a lot smaller. But I planned on growing. I planned on having other buildings. I ran the church like I had 1,000, though we didn't have but a few. Does that make sense? So when we got, within the first couple years I was there, I knew we were going to grow. I believed God was going to bless. Our bathrooms in the foyer, you walked in the men's and you had one urinal and one toilet and one sink. And it was tiny. Where for 40 people, it was more than enough. The ladies, if I remember, was 2 stalls and 1 sink. 40 people wasn't that big of a deal. But I went to the deacons and I said, by this time I'd been there about 2 years or so, I forget how long, and I said, hey, we need to upgrade the bathrooms. I mean, they're small. We were growing by that point. We had around 90 or so, and there would be a line every now and then, but nothing major. Still wasn't a problem. But I said, we need to upgrade the bathrooms. Yeah, preacher, we probably need to just make them nicer. I said, no. We're tearing the men's and women's out, and that side's becoming nothing but men's. And the toddler nursery we're tearing completely out, and that's becoming the women's. They said, that's going to be too big. I said, yep, we're going to have 7 stalls in the ladies. We're going to have 5 sinks, and we're going to have 4 urinals and 3 stalls in the men, and we're going to have 5 sinks in the men's. They laughed. They said, preacher, we don't need that many. I said, we're going to. We're going to do it. We're going to do it right. I didn't pastor like I was running 80 or 90. I pastored what I wanted to run. Okay? We did it. We paid for it. We didn't borrow money. We did over $2 million worth of projects while I was pastor there. We never borrowed a dime for one of them. I raised the money, and as we had the money, we did it. That's the way I operated. I'm not saying it's wrong to borrow. That's just not the way the Lord led me. And God did some amazing things and taught my people faith and taught them how to give sacrificially. Wouldn't have traded it for the world. And we did beautiful bathrooms. My deacons by that time had learned preacher's going to do what he's want to do, so we might as well get behind it and smile and back him, and then they did. Can I tell you, when we got up to the 200 mark and the 250 mark and the 300 mark, people were glad that we had 7 stalls in the ladies. They were glad we had 4 urinals and 3 stalls in the men's. They were glad there were 5 sinks for people to wash their hands, and they were thankful. But if I'd have waited till we'd have probably never grew, because people get embarrassed. Church people that love God will wait in line forever. Lost people or carnal people come in, and if things ain't right, they're just going to go find another church. And there were too many churches in our area for them to go to. So pastor like you pastor your church. If you want to run 500, then pastor it like you're running 500 now. Administrate it like you're running 500 now. That's important, okay? Keep the records. Records is important. Commitment forms, order forms. Remember, no ministry will ever be any stronger than the records that are kept to maintain its integrity and its forward growth. Every year, at the end of the year, I could look at my church and I could tell you how many members had joined, how many people had been saved, how many we had baptized, how many people we had lost, why we lost them. Did they get mad at the preacher? Did they move out of town because of a job? Did they go take a work in a ministry somewhere else? I kept all of those records, and I wanted to know, were we at a plus or a deficit every year? And every year I pastored but one, we were always in a plus. We were always growing. I had an assistant, I forget how long I'd been there, and he decided that he wanted to be the pastor and do some things that were unethical and wrong, and so he wound up leaving mad, and then decided to try to destroy the church, and he tried to destroy the church. He did a great job in hurting the church, and that year we lost 100-something people, and we had a deficit that year. But every other year after that, we were back in the positives and growing, and God blessed. How'd you do it? Soul winning. Soul winning will get the job done. It will always get the job done. So your records is very important. You ought to know how many's been saved, who's been trained, what neighborhoods you've been to, what prospects have been visited, how many times they've been visited, what was their response. There's too many programs. Breeze is the one we use and the one I recommend. We even use it at Operation Go. You can pay for a little bit or a lot, but it's a great church management program. There's too many out there that you can use to not be able to keep good records. And then notice the place of prayer. The Soul Winning Club should be born through prayer. Please note that part of the trainee's development and personal soul winning growth is related to prayer. It cannot be overemphasized that the real success of the Soul Winning Club will be proportional to the amount of time and direction that's given by the soul winning director through personal prayer and a seeking of the Lord for His leadership. Because I teach technique and I teach you 13-point plans and I give you golden keys and I give you tips on how to deal, does not ever eliminate the fact we need God's power. We need His presence. This is not a soul winning program that's telling you it's just all about if you get your routine down, it'll work. You need the touch of God. You need the power of God, the presence of God, the leadership of God. And your program and your club needs to be born through prayer. Can I just encourage you to work on your prayer life? Spend time alone with God and talk to Him every day. Allow Him to speak and communicate to you. God wants us to talk to Him, fellowship with Him, and communicate with Him. And whether you're a soul winner, whether you're a member, a preacher, a soul winning director, we must be talking to God daily if we're going to survive. Now, we're not going to go to section 4, and it's going to be a little different than what you've got in your book, but if you want to turn to, and go ahead, Brother Richard, if you want to get the What is a Church slides up for me, or if they know, it's on page number 38. We're going to do this, and then we're going to stop for lunch, all right? What is a church? And we're going to look at this with the help of the Lord. While they're getting those up, and they'll get them here in a minute, and I'm going to say a few things that's not on there anyway. There's a Latin statement, que vadis, and it's Latin for where are you going? In the Latin translation of the New Testament, it's a question Peter asked Jesus in John 13, verse 36. Our Lord's answer is packed with theology and prophecy, but that's not the reason I mention that phrase to us today. In the business world, when someone asks, where are you going? It's more of a gut check. It's a query. It's a question that's meant for you to tap the brakes, rethink your current decision or your overall strategy. And that's what I want to ask all of us for a few moments. I'm asking every pastor, every youth leader, every layman, every deacon, every churchgoer, every member of a church, where are you going? And more specifically, where is your church going? Stop and think with me a minute. Where will your congregation be in 6 months? Where will it be in 5 years? Right now at this moment, I can tell you where you could possibly be in the very near future. You could be headed for insignificance or even oblivion. Let me give you a statement that's just a mind-boggler. By the year 2035, the United States will no longer be a Christian nation, they say. In fact, America will be the third largest mission field in the world. Those are bold statements, but there's unbiased research that's not even been done by people you and I would agree with that backs them up. In less than 15 years, professing Christians will number less than 50% of America's population. Now, I use America because that's where I'm from. And by Christians, when they did this study, that's including evangelicals, fundamentalists, charismatics, mainline denominations, Catholics, once-a-year church attendees. They're lumping everyone together that in less than 15 years, less than 50% of the United States population will even identify of any form of Christianity. Instead, America will be shaped by various religions such as Islam, Hinduism, cults, atheists, agnostics, and my favorites, nuns. They're individuals who say they are spiritual but not religious, and certainly not spiritual devotees. It's probably a sign of things to come, but Americans who classify themselves as nuns constitute 1/3 of the population by 2035. The unfortunate prediction is that true Christians will become part of a global demographic minority sooner rather than later. Now, my point is, we could talk about all the bad that's gone on in the world today. We could talk about all the things that's going on. I really don't want to deal with that. We could talk about in America all the decisions, all the things, just craziness as you look at the world today. When we're arguing over whether a guy's really a guy, and gender, and biological, it's crazy where we're at, is it not? But without getting into all that, my point is the one healing balm over nearly 250 years has been the local church. Yes, it always took time, but eventually people rediscovered their spiritual roots, and as a nation and a community by community responded with personal recommitment and spiritual evangelism. The local church has always been there. It was America's heart-lung machine that gave meaning to life, gave meaning to work, gave meaning to prosperity, social interaction, and a whole lot more. Church attendance swelled, God, the Bible, regular worship habits regained their prominence in our lives. But where are we today? We have deepening rifts, if not chasms, within our national fabric. Instantaneous worldwide communication has birthed a morass of jargon, platitudes, fake news. There are plagues, there are conflicts, there are economic uncertainties. Is it just another cycle, or to paraphrase Mark Twain, history always repeats itself, and it just appears with a fresh coat of paint? I said just a little bit ago that something's different today, very different. We're no longer in a cycle. What changed? The domestic and international challenges? No. Jesus predicted in the Gospels they would always be there. The difference is that for the first time in our collective history, the local church is on the sidelines. In fact, it's downsizing. The tragedy is beyond alarming. We could be looking at a Christian winter. There's another sweeping statement, but I'll stand. That's another sweeping statement, but I'll stand Buy it because I'm basing my words on data-driven developments, the scope of which our heritage has never seen. Listen to these trends from Baptist heritage. 72% of all Baptist churches in America are declining in membership, regular attendance, and even visitors. These are Bible-preaching, theologically solid gospel churches. Again, I can't speak for Canada, but these are statistics that are very recent in America. 53% of gospel-preaching Baptist churches did not baptize one teenager in the past 12 months. I want to say that again. I don't think y'all grabbed that. 53% of all gospel-preaching Baptist churches in America did not baptize one teenager in the past 12 months. How are we expected to grow? The spiritual well-being of the younger generations is especially dear to my heart. That's a phenomenal statistic. In less than 20 years, 1/3 of all Baptist churches will have disappeared. Let's expand our perspective. By the end of today, as many as 30 churches will have closed their doors forever in America. Tomorrow the same, the next day, that's 900 each month. Actually, we've been declining for decades. Since 1950, there are 1/3 fewer churches in existence. In the next 24 hours, 3,500 people will decide to leave the church for good. And the day after, and the day after. That's been a dagger in my heart. And it's driven me to find the cause of that migration. Why are we in this mess? Have we as pastors, church members, laymen, Sunday school teachers, choir members, other important workers become too successful? Are we simply living off the capital of our spiritual ancestors? No, I find those concepts difficult to accept when I realize that half the world has yet to hear a true presentation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. While we've had success, our job's only half finished. Would we not agree with that this morning? Are these trends simply parts of a market correction? While I agree that a number of sound business principles can apply to the operation of a church, it is the goal of a church to succeed by continually converting, discipling, and empowering people to make a visible difference in their lives, their families, and their communities. This church and any church should not allow itself to be marginalized. The church should always be positioned to move forward. Given these developments, I have to ask everyone, where are you going? Where should you be going? Where do you want your church to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in the year 2035? If you have a vision, do you have an actual plan to reach that vision and goal? After all, the value of any plan depends on its aim. Now, despite those hard truths that I just gave you, I'm never one to say the church has become irrelevant, nor will it ever be so. And I refuse to accept the tiresome phrase that we live in a post-Christian society and that there's nothing we can do to change that momentum. No, the only thing that's set in stone was handed down from a mountaintop 3.5 millennia ago, and that was the 10 Commandments. Amen? So where does that leave us today? Let me borrow another phrase that Western businesses like to use and then attach to our churches. What's the bottom line? In particular, if the world would sum up you and your church in one sentence, what would that sentence be? I know what it could be. I believe it could be, the summary statement could be, you saw how deeply modern culture was penetrating the Christian ethic of your world, and you decided to revitalize not only your church but also your community. Is that not what we ought to be doing? I would also say that your church had grown into a counterculture force that reshaped values, nurtured individuals and families, and established a blueprint for success that other churches were eager to adapt. Now, none of that's wishful thinking. It'll take work, but what if you and I could change the direction of our neighborhood, our city, and beyond by becoming a juggernaut of soul winning and discipling to such an extent that the secular subject matter experts would be astounded? I want you to never forget, God is looking for hearts and hands He can use. we can establish a strategy for your church that attracts and keeps, I call it gain and retain, worshipers week after week. We can build into your staff the necessary skill sets for Bible-based, digitally robust outreach that defies 21st century religious trends. We can tailor your programs to satisfy the spiritual hunger in your area, prepare your congregation to meet and exceed all the goals you set, and equip the next generation of believers who will eventually become the next spiritual leaders. Does that sound far-fetched? Consider for a moment the first church we read about in the book of Acts. We looked at it last night. Theirs was a model of action, a model of change, and a model of victory. Those men and women were so excited they couldn't stop themselves from sharing the good news and building up new believers. Were there not challenges in that day in Acts? Of course, Pharisees, Sadducees, Herodians, Hellenists, Romans, Gnostics, cults, mystery religions, persecutions, Christians being thrown in amphitheaters with lions and beasts for the pleasure of heathen to watch as they wrestled and died. There was no democracy, there was no freedom of religion, but they never submitted to the cultural pressure of their world, and instead they adapted to turn those real challenges into unique opportunities. I like to think their faith was an atmosphere. They lived, they breathed, and they embodied the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Their life was so distinctive, their witnessing so irresistible, that believers tripped over themselves to join authentic faith. And while that faith was one of joy and special fellowship, each Christian always understood their mission. To share the gospel story every day during their activities reaching Jerusalem for Christ. Many times that resulted in helping the poor, the sick, the oppressed with food, money, and shelter. After all, no one in the book of Acts grew up a Christian. You became a believer because someone witnessed to you. Every believer was a witness. I say to you and I today, that success, that same success can happen 2,000 years later. Why? Because we have the same God. We have the same mission. We have the same power of Christ. But what we need today are new ways to influence society and better ways to share the gospel. I've always believed that Paul was the greatest church planter in history. He set out to win every community and every demographic. So once again, que vadis? Where are we at? Where are we going? We're at an inflection point in our nation's destiny. We can continue along the path outlined by secular dogmas, a road that leads to ineffectiveness, or you and I can seize the opportunity with conferences like this to revitalize our churches, our communities, and our nation. I want to show you one way that I think that can be done. And that's through this little thing that we call, what is a church? Now, Matthew 16:18, you know the verse. Jesus said, I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. When we talk about what is a church, we're not talking about theological understanding. Many of you could give a better theological definition of the church than I could. A lot of people today that are in the area of the church leadership do not know what is a church. The largest numbers of non-trained and non-mobilized people in America are assembled together in the pews of our Bible-preaching churches. Our churches are loaded with people that do not understand what their function is or what the structure of the church is. And if we're going to build a productive church, it's important that we know what is a church. It's not theological understanding, but it's noticing her function. Vince Lombardi, many of you may or may not know, is known for winning 7 championships in the NFL. He's inducted in the Football Hall of Fame. Each year he would stand before his team at the beginning of the season, and he'd say, "Gentlemen, this is a football." Why would he do that? He knew the importance of getting back to the fundamentals. You know, our job as Christians, as preachers especially, is to move people from profundity to simplicity. In order to move hearers from simplicity to profundity. This is a football. We need to get back to the basics. We need to get back to the fundamentals. That was a simple illustration that I'm going to use. And the church has three major functions. It's like a copy machine, a printing press. I seen one, I think, in the office here, Pastor Richard, and very much the same type of, whether you call it a printing press or whether we just talk about a copy machine or a printer, I think you will understand the church has three major functions, and it's the greatest single illustration that we can use to describe what a church is. That press, that copy machine in your office or in your church has three functions. Function number one is the image. In the center of that copy machine, that printing press, if it's a printing press, there are cylinders. If it's a copy machine, it's a glass plate that you put your paper on, and that scanner goes across it, and it creates and it copies an image from what you've placed on there that's going to be copied. Right? So that division is the image. That image is your public services. We want to stamp an image on every person that comes through this church, do we not? You as a church are putting an image, good or bad. Whatever you put on that glass and hit print. My kids would sneak in the office sometimes and leave pages on my desk and in the copy machine of their face, where they'd stuck their face on the glass and hit copy without the secretary knowing about it, or their hands, or just stupid stuff. Whatever you put on the glass, that's what's getting printed. That's the image that you're going to have. So understand that when we talk about church, we're not talking about theological definition. I'm talking very practical right now. It's an image. It's your public image, and that image is based on your services, whether it be if people watch live stream, or if they see what you have on your website, or when they walk into your service. And when people walk into a church and later walk out, it's our job to have put the image of Christ on them. Right? Do you realize everyone walks in your church, they have three questions they want answered from you? Everyone that walks through your doors, there's three questions they want answered. Number one, do you love me? If someone don't feel loved, they're not coming back. Not only do they want to know, do you love me, but secondly, they may not ask it, but they're asking it inside, can you help me? Do you love me? Can you help me? And here's the third question that many people want answered, can I trust you? Well, that's a big one, ain't it? Can I trust you? Don't ever forget, everyone that walks through the doors of this church or any church, they're asking, do they love me? Can they help me? And can I trust them? The image, that's why it's very important what we do in our services and how we run our services. You take blank paper, you put it into the machine, and it comes out a printed sheet. And what's on that sheet is whatever's been put on that glass, right? The public services that we have, we're to put the image of Christ on each attendee. Now, we have ministries that help us with that function. Choir helps us. Nursery, ushers. All of those, greeters, the preacher, the preaching, the sound. That's why what a church looks like. Keeping the grounds neat. Keeping the sanctuary up to date. It's not so we can talk about how lavish it is. It's so, hey listen, have you ever been in a place, I'm at it all the time. You ever been somewhere that you're looking for somewhere to eat, you don't know where to go, you don't know anyone, and you're just trying to find somewhere, and you drive by a restaurant and the grass is this high and the parking lot has cracks in it and there's 4 or 5 cars in it and it's lunchtime or it's dinner time, y'all call dinner, and and there's the shingles are half off, and the windows, the things are, it just looks dilapidated and run down. Are you probably stopping there? No. Image. What a church looks like on the outside matters. Oh, it don't matter. Well, bless God, if you love Jesus, you ought to come to church no matter what. You're 100% right. But are we trying to get people that already love Jesus to church? No. They're supposed to come because God tells them to. We're trying to get sinners. That's why I'm amazed in the States. Y'all probably don't do this up here, but in the States I'm amazed as I travel and I see signs, and it's usually Independent Baptist. And the sign, literally, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. Independent, fundamental, premillennial, King James, Bible believing, sin hating, devil hating, Jesus loving, Baptist church. To someone that is all those things, that's a blinking sign. Come in here. But you know what the average sinner or lost person drives by that sign and says? Cult. You can be all them things and not have to advertise it on a sign. You understand what I'm saying? We plant an image every time someone drives by the church, every time they come into a service, whether you start on time. I know it don't matter to a lot of people, but I'm going to tell you, people are I am very time-oriented. My time matters. I only have so much of it. And one day, I've got to stand before the Lord with what I've done with it. My time matters. I was in a church just recently, and it got 11 o'clock. And there's visitors there, and I see them looking at their watch. I'm the guest preacher, and I'm looking at my watch. 5 after, 7 after, finally about 8 after, we start. You know what that says to the average visitor? My time ain't important to you. When we start, the type of music that we have, the how we conduct ourselves. My wife and me and my family walked into a church. I was the guest preacher. We were there. We had never been there before. And guy looks at us, and the first thing they do is 2, 3, 4. They're counting all my children. Drives my wife and my oldest daughter, nuts. What's it matter? You ain't paying for them, so why you got to count them? I don't care that they get counted. And then we walk in. We've never been to this church. We don't know. We're there for Sunday school. I'm teaching Sunday school, but I don't know where I'm supposed to go. They shook my hand. They're door greeters. There's people standing around. They just all kind of look at it, and I see a woman going, look, 1, 2, 3, 4. 7. We had 7 with us that day. 7 children. She didn't even know that wasn't all of them. Now, if I was a visitor, what kind of image does that give me? If I was a lost person, how do you think that makes me feel? I had to go find someone and ask, where's your nursery? Or where's your bathrooms? Where do my kids go to Sunday school? Image. There should have been someone there. Good to have you. I'm so-and-so. You are? I'm Brian Treadway. I'm the guest preacher today. Maybe that would have got more out of them. I don't know. They should have, hey, kids, you're here for Sunday school. Would you like someone to help get you to the class? Image. I get people that love Jesus are going to go to church whether things are perfect or not. But we're trying to stamp the image of Christ on visitors and lost people that come in. What we do matters. The function of the church, you're putting an image, good or bad, on everyone that walks through these doors. What kind of image are you planting? Now, here's what happens. I could take the time to tell you about this gas station. They decided they wanted to get a lot more people, so they ran a huge promotion in the papers. They said, we're going to sell gas at an extremely low price. We're going to have giveaways, and we're going to have free food, and da-da-da-da-da. And so very early in the morning, people rolled up early and waited in lines, and the gas station did not prepare, so they ran out of food by 9 that morning. They ran out of gas by 10 o'clock that morning. Lines were backed up. People were getting frustrated. By 1 o'clock that day, they had to put signs that say they were no longer open. Do you know what that did? It did not do what they thought it did. What they did is that ran a promotion that taught them, everyone, don't buy gas here. I'm amazed at how we make ourselves martyrs sometimes as churches. Visitor comes in, maybe they got a baby. Baby screaming, no one says, hey, the nursery's there. Hey, would you like help? Would you like for me to here's where, here, the restrooms are here, the service is here. Is there anything we can do for you? No, the service don't start on time. No one helps them out with the baby. They got to figure out where the nursery is, and then the baby's taken, and then maybe there's no one in the nursery yet because they're not there early, and so they're trying to find someone in here, and church starts late, and not many people shake their hand. No one makes them feel welcome, and then the invitation's given, and the service ends, and that couple leaves, and they don't come back, and the pastor says, well, bless God, they just can't take our stand in the preaching. Just maybe that had nothing to do with it. Maybe it was the image that got put on them. The church has a function. We're to put an image. But suppose we have a perfect public service. That's why it matters, ushers, that you're trained. Every position in a church ought to be trained. There ought to be training, and there ought to be in a sheet of this is what an usher does. This is the expectations. This is the requirements. This is the obligations. This is how you usher. This is how you take up an offering. This is how you're a door greeter. This is what you do. This is what you say. This is the nursery. This is how you run a nursery. This is how you work with kids. There ought to be a sheet on everyone, a job description on everything that's done in the church. So inspiration without education always leads to frustration. So people need to be educated. This is how door greeter. You greet people. You ask them, do you need to know where the restrooms are? Maybe you go ahead and have a map, though it's a small church. Here's the map. Here's the sanctuary. Here's where the bathrooms. There's one downstairs. There's one in there. Here's the nursery. Here's where we do this. Here's where we do that. But you stamp an image. But suppose you have everything perfect in the public service. The preacher preaches a great message. He starts on time. The congregationals are great. The choir knocks it out of the park. The people are very friendly. But the pews are empty. See, the function of a church is not just an image, but function number 2 is the feeder. You don't get an image on paper unless you put paper into the printer, right? You have to feed paper in the printer if we're going to print an image. We must learn how to feed hundreds of people into our services, but first we have to train our people how to feed the church. The feeder. The feeder could be called evangelism. Now, you're not going to find a lot of these blanks in your notebook if you're looking for them, okay? Because a lot of times when we do this, we don't have time for this session, but I think it's too important to leave out, so I've sped up some of these others to make sure I can get this in. But this feeder could be called evangelism. This feeder could be called outreach. The only way you're going to have a printed page is you got to have a blank page going in. You can have the perfect service. You can have the most beautiful church. You can have the best sanctuary. You can have the good sound system. You can have all that. But if you don't have no lost people, if you have no visitors, you have no image. Could be called soul winning. There's your best feeder. Visitation, etc. Operation Go. Soul winning. That is a feeder. These things are feeders. What is a feeder? It's what's getting the blank paper into the church so an image can be stamped upon it. Now again, that's where image is very important. That's where training is very important. I want to encourage you, know your position, know how you to run your position. If you're not sure, ask your pastor. There ought to be job descriptions just typed up or written out or given to every position in the church, whether it be piano player. I had job description. My piano players knew 15 minutes before service they are to be at the piano and they are to be playing music just lightly for people to come in. They were not to come in 2 minutes before the service starts, throwing kids down on a pew, grabbing their psalm book, fixing their hair, trying to hurry and get to a piano. Image. My song leader was to have the songs that was going to be sung and the specials lined up a week in advance. Some churches do it more than that, a month in advance. And we kind of had a rotation, but that feeder, job descriptions, what are the ushers to do? When are they to take up the offering? How are they to take up the offering? Special singers, when do they get up? You can kill a lot of time in service. Well, we're going to have so-and-so sing, and they're in the very back of the church, and they got to get the kid off their lap and go hand another kid to grandma and grandpa while they come up, and then they're grabbing microphones, and you've killed 5 minutes that you could have had extra time for something else. Image. Image. But the only way that image gets stamped is if you have things feeding blank pages through. You've got to have a feeder. You've got to have people that are trying to get others into the church. Now note the function. The feeder puts people into the services. Great public services with no visitors means no growth. Right? The church has ministries to help with that function. Operation Go, bus ministry. That's all feeder ministries. Plan promotions, that's feeder ministries. I know a lot of pastors and churches, they're against promotions. Here's a statement I hear in the States. I don't know if you've heard it in Canada, but I hear it all the time in the States. I'm in meetings and conferences all across the country, and I'll hear preachers go, bless God, you get them in with a hot dog, you'll have to keep them with a hamburger. Ever hear that? Okay, and what's your point? I will gladly give a sinner a hamburger and then get them to come back and give them a hot dog or vice versa. Jesus said, go on the highways and hedges and compel them to come into my house. That's an invitation of getting people to the kingdom and saved, right? Is that not the illustration of that parable? How did Jesus start it? The master invited people to his house for a great feast. What were they using to get people to the master's house? Food. By the way, if you get saved and fall in love with Jesus, do you have to have a hamburger and a hot dog to come to church? No. But we're not reaching the saved people with the hamburgers and hot dogs. We're trying to reach the lost people. We're trying to compel them to come. Don't tell me you don't use promotion. Air conditioning's a promotion. You don't have to have it. Padded chairs are a promotion. A sound system is a promotion. Heat is a promotion. I'm big on promotions. I wanted to get as many lost people as I could. Once a month, every Sunday, we had Promotion Sunday in our church. It may have been Bring a Friend Sunday. It may have been Public Servant Sunday. It may have been Fill a Car Sunday, Bring Your Neighbor Sunday. But we had all kinds of promotions. Why? We were looking for feeders. We're looking for things to get people into the church. Now suppose that the printing press has paper being fed. The image is being printed on each sheet, but the paper jams. You ever had, at the worst time, you're in a hurry, you need it copied, and you go to print, you got 5, 6 pages, maybe more to print, and you get one page in, and then the stupid thing jams up. The result's the same. You have no retained results. You have no paper with an image, right? So there's a third function of a church. Now I could expand on these greatly, but it's time for lunch here in a few minutes. Function number 3, you got your image, that's your public services. That's the image people you're putting on people. By the way, live stream is an image. I get that we want Christians in church. I understand that, and I'm for that. We ought to be in service, not just watching online. But there's lost people before they ever darken your door, they're going to check out your service. You need to make sure it's good enough quality that they want to come back, or that they want to try to visit you, that they can hear the preacher clearly, hear the music clearly, see what's going on. It don't have to be a $100,000 system, but it ought to be good enough that if sinners are watching, they're not turned off by what they see. Image. Function number 1 is image. You got to have a feeder, that's the people, to put an image on. Function number 3 is the keeper. The last section is what I call the keeper. For instance, if you feed 100 sheets of paper through the printer that has a perfect image on it, that paper needs to fall into the tray called the keeper. If we're going to build a growing church, we must feed it with people. We put an image on them, but we have to keep the ones that we reach, do we not? What is that? Here's the function. By the way, every ministry, we'll get to that in a minute. Every person in your church is fulfilling one of these 3 roles. Everything in the church is doing one of these 3 things. A keeper could be called discipleship, right? Retention, care ministry, Sunday school. I don't have a lot of time to dwell on this. I talked with Pastor the other day. We were talking about Sunday school. If soul winning's here, importance in the church, Sunday school is just right below it. And unfortunately, we got a lot of churches, a lot of these new young guys coming out that think they've invented this new idea called small groups that's going to revolutionize church. Small groups, independent Baptists have had small groups for years. It's called Sunday school. The problem is we got away from using Sunday school what it was designed to do. I don't have time to tell you, but if you can be a soul-winning church, if you don't have your Sunday school structured right, you're not going to retain people. Sunday school is a keeper. In our soul-winning program, when we won someone to Christ, many of them had never darkened the door of our church, never been to church. Them and their family immediately got put and assigned a Sunday school class and a Sunday school teacher immediately after they were won. If we won the husband, he got assigned a class, his wife got assigned, and the children in the home got assigned, and immediately those names went to Sunday school teachers, and the next week my teachers were visiting each one of them. The children's teacher was visiting, the men's teacher, the ladies, they were all visiting that home. Hey, we're the Sunday school teachers of Emmanuel Baptist. We heard Brother Richard got saved. We would like to invite you to our Sunday school class. We have food every Sunday. We have we have 2 events twice a month outside of the church. It may be bowling, it may be fishing, it may be going to a restaurant, it may be coffee house, pizza party, it may be coming over for this or that. We'd love for you to come. And then the Sunday school teacher for the wife's class, if it's not the same class, is going to show up. Sunday school teacher for the kids are going to show up. Hey, I'm such and such teacher at Emmanuel Baptist. We're the boys' teacher, and we would love to have your boys. They're going to get assigned a teacher immediately, though they've never stepped foot in the church. And then in my Sunday school classes, I only allowed the class to get to about 10 people. Because that Sunday school teacher was responsible to watch every week, check on their people every week, call, text, was there anything they needed, and so forth. And it kept it small. That independent Baptists, if your Sunday school's relationships, so new converts come in, they can come into a small group, they can be accepted, they can be invited to things. We had people sometimes that came to Sunday school and then left. They didn't come to main service. That was okay. It wasn't long, they got in the main service. Feeder. Sunday school is about building relationships. Many churches, Sunday schools become no more than doctrinal and educational, and it's 40 minutes of teaching. That's what the pulpit's supposed to be Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday, coming from the pastor, the shepherd. My Sunday school teachers we provided the materials. We used Brother Chappell's Striving Together stuff. We used all the video stuff and the things that were cheap. And 15 minutes is the max I had a teacher teach. And then they made it very practical. I wasn't trying to get people in Sunday school to understand the doctrine of sanctification, justification, glorification. I just wanted them to learn, to come to church, love Jesus, learn about other Christians, and we would preach and teach from the pulpit and help them grow, and then get them in discipleship on Wednesday nights and help them grow. Well, I don't have enough room for that, preacher. Think outside the box. Right here in this church, you've got within 2 miles, you've got Starbucks, Tim Hortons, coffee shops, restaurants. What's wrong with having a class meet there and then leaving 5 minutes early to get here in time? I'm just saying, you got to keep them. We're not just trying to get them saved and in one service, we want to keep them. All of these are keeper ministries. Now note the functions. Image, public service. Feeders, outreach. Keeper is discipleship. It does no good to put a wonderful image on paper and then have it destroyed because the keeper malfunctions. The church has ministries to help with that function. I just talked about a Sunday school, groups, sales, etc. Now, pastor, I'm speaking to the pastors a minute or leaders in church. To proceed, here's what you ought to pray about doing. You ought to list each of your church's present ministries. Nursery, Sunday school, whatever you got, list them all. Every one of them. And then determine or assign a function to each. What is the function of your ushers? What's the function of your doorkeepers? What's your function of Sunday school teachers? What's the function of the bus workers? All the ministries, assign every one of them a function. They're either a feeder, they're an image, or they're a keeper. Which one are they? And then train your workers in their function. Make sure they know their function. That's key leadership. Your feeder, key leadership, is going to be soul winning director. Right? Every church ought to have a soul winning director, whether you run 10 people or 1,000. Every church ought to have a Sunday school director. Whether you're running 10 or 1,000. Pastor and administrate like you run what you want to run, not what you're running. The preacher is responsible for the image. The pastor is responsible to oversee making sure that's right. That's the key leadership. Pastor, soul winning director, Sunday school director. Now, I don't have time to get into all this, so I'm going to stop there. This could go on for a good while with my slides. But here's what I'm going to say. What is a church? Practically, a church is to stamp the image of Christ on people that come through and then do what they can to make sure they keep them so that we have more people to do more for God, to keep stamping an image, to keep feeding, and to keep. That's our job. Most churches, most pastors, most people in a church have no clue what their function is, and they could not tell you what the ministries, what the main purpose of those ministries are. I'm not talking about theologically, but if we're going to change the trends that I talked about at the beginning, we better know what a church is, and we better know what our functions are, and we better be doing the best we can to stamp the right image. When I first took Emmanuel, we had a few people Sunday morning. It was nothing for me to fudge and preach, 50 minutes. My people loved it. They shouted me on. The more people we got, I noticed that we hit a plateau. And I noticed that if I preach shorter, more of them people come back the next Sunday. So I got to where on Sunday morning, I was 25, 30 minutes. Preacher, you can't say much. Oh, you can say a whole lot if you get to the point and don't chase rabbits and go off on hunting trails and go through. You can say a whole lot. I got to where on Sunday morning, I become very time conscious. Not for my Christians. I have Christians say, preacher, you should have went another 30 minutes. Man, I would have loved to have gone another 30 minutes. But I had carnal and lost people sitting there. And you know what I noticed when I cut my Sunday mornings back to a normal time? I noticed some of them visitors started coming back Sunday night. Now I'm able to kind of teach them. Sunday night was about teaching and growing Christians. Function, image, feeder, keeper. A lot more I could say, but we're going to pray, and then I'll let Pastor come and give instructions for lunchtime. If we can keep it to about 45 minutes, no more than, which ought to be good with our group, we'll be able to carry right on, and I will have you out of here on time. We're right where we need to be. Father, I love you. And I thank you for the listening ear of your people. I pray I've been of help, encouragement, and Lord, inspiration without education always leads to frustration. I pray that I have not only inspired, but hopefully I've educated someone in something that will help them do a better work for Christ. Bless our food and our fellowship and our time together now in Jesus' name. Pastor.